one of the issues I have with history is we forget. And sometimes it's not only forgetting, it's also, I don't know what apartheid is.
Yes.
And you almost have a village where the people have intentionally, for whatever reason, maybe even they paid, it's a job. We're going to keep one town as an apartheid museum so that young children can go visit there for a camp and go and feel it in real time. We pay them, it's a museum, there's people that work there. The black people there, when the child visits, they're like, as soon as you get there, black kids one side, white kids, you're going to go to the mansions, the black kids go to the township. Why are we here? Because we don't want you guys to repeat the mistakes of the past. Because our fear is not just forgetting. Because you're like, oh, bro, I was never there. That's my grandfather, bro. It's like, we want you to, instead of Mtampe initiation or these things, instead of going to Disneyland, every South African child goes to this thing a few times in their childhood to go and see what was wrong with it. And at the end, they do a report so that it doesn't work. Because politicians will keep, especially where people are poor and struggling, they'll keep throwing these slogans and these things as a way of attaining power without meaning it. And we waste so much productive time that people could have used to build great things because they're listening to leaders that are lying to them.
Unfortunately, people repeat the same mistakes.
And do you think we must accept it?
And if you don't have a strong leadership,
Sure.
which a good succession plan, like go China, if we are caught up in corruption, stealing people's money, death sentence is
Sure.
most likely. So if we can have that continuation, systems that, you cannot just do away with, but yeah, people always repeat the same mistakes. So people need to be sort of channeled. If you give them too much liberty, I don't know whether you've read that document, the elders, whatever, Protocol of Zion. They talk about things like that. But if you give them too much freedom, it's going to be a jungle. It becomes a circus. So you need a strong leadership with mechanism and plans, documents and, programs to keep them, aligned. Though you're going to give them, a bit of liberties. But if you leave them unchecked, you're asking for a disaster.
It's called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion.
Yeah, they speak about those things, even though there's the major Zionists, they've denied it. But if you read that, I think it's long.
Originally published in 1903, author is unknown, but plagiarized from various European authors. It says here, genre.
Everything that is happening now.
The genre says anti-Semitism, black propaganda. That's the genre.
I can tell you, if you listen to the talk, it's just that they removed it on YouTube. But if you read that book, everything that is happening now, it's something that's spoken about in that document.
It says here, Britannica, a fraudulent document that served as a pretext and rationale for anti-Semitism, mainly in the early 20th century.
No, because that document was not supposed to be public knowledge, so therefore, if it comes into the public, you're going to deny it. We know now, you've never been cancelled go social media. I mean, I've been cancelled go social media on Facebook or
Sure.
All mediums. There was a time when YouTube and Google, they were removing everything. They were saying they are fighting of fake news.
Sure.
Russia television came and says, no, they're not doing that. They are removing the narrative that they don't agree with.
Sure.
So obviously, that document, as it come, Idi Amin used to, quote that document.
Reference.
Yeah, because Idi Amin was anti-Israel.
Jeez.
I think later on became a Muslim. He converted. He went to Saudi Arabia. So
Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan. I don't know if you want to add anything that we didn't cover.
Ronald Reagan.
No, in terms of, I need to speak about the fall of the wall. Did they have a meeting? Was there an agreement?
No, they had meetings. They used to have meetings between the Western countries. I think I forgot the success saga Stalin. I'll remember now.
Sure.
But with Gorbachev, the meetings were more cordial. Because even the West, they said it was the first time they see a Soviet leader who looks like Gorbachev, who was willing, and he came with his wife, he was friendlier. And that's when, they started to talk about these reforms, which, the Soviet need to be liquidated. And Gorbachev was agreeable to that. And eventually,
Nikita Khrushchev.
Yes. So
was the successor of
they
Joseph
met
Stalin.
with them, but the Cold War was still intense there. But when Gorbachev came in, I think the Soviets, they also wanted a way out.
Mikhail.
Yeah,
Mikhail
Mikhail Gorbachev.
Gorbachev,
You know,
former
sometimes
president of the Soviet Union.
uke wathi nilwa ninamajitekazi nishaya inkomane uke nishaya inkomane
Yena mankomane.
inkomane bayibizani ikasi besithi fiyago nilwa ngenqindi like fist fight.
Sure. Oh, Fight Club, baba. David Fincher.
Bakushaya kubanda la uze ikhala lakho ngathi lisukile. Yabo winter baba. Khayileni. So sometimes you fight as guys. It's a stalemate. You know, and ukwabona senime so you want, I don't know, a dignified way to come out of the fight. I think Russia, they needed that, the Soviet, a dignified way to say, no, it's reform. Let's call it reform, because they were already defeated, because they could not sustain the Cold War. The cost of the war, it was costing them much, in terms of
could be like the apartheid government.
They were buying more arms.
It's almost like the apartheid government saying they concede to the liberation movements. We're losing here, but let's do it with dignity.
Yeah. The way Americans usually do when they're moving out of Taliban cities and in Vietnam, they'll find a nicer way of putting it and say, you know what, we are allowing the dialogue, to take
Not
over.
what we lost.
I think Russia was in that position to say, you know what, let's just find a more dignified way, because everything that happened after the reforms in Russia, Boris Yeltsin, it was capitalism. The oligarchs started coming in. What happened here?
Yeah, Boris Yeltsin was before Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I think the ANC, they also copied in Russia, what happened in Russia, because all these guys, they started privatizing everything that was state-owned,
That was Boris Yeltsin.
Yeah.
There's a nice book called The Oligarchs. Very difficult to find.
They came in. So ANC, when they had a blueprint, they look at the Soviet, and say we can't do this. And they look at the African states who were looting, because they were there, African states. They look at the homelands. Some of them, they come from the homelands. Most of the leadership of these political parties, they were guys that were privileged, go homelands. He's not just your ordinary person. I'm a chief. There are royalties, Olumisa, Mandela, Matanzim. It was not like taking everyone, Yeah, they were handpicking with Nonghenas Palai, Falumyanga, Smaz Lubando. So they were already, exposed.
And they wanted to copy that. I get those sentiments when I listen to Julius and the EFF.
Yeah.
I get those sentiments when I listen to Gates and McKenzie as well. The way these guys worship and reference China, Russia, the idea of nationalizing, I feel like they want to nationalize and then after that privatize into the hands of, which is what
their hands.
I think the ANC has tried to do. I mean, if they could, I think Ramaphosa would give ESCOM to Patrice. Yeah. If they could, they'd give something else to someone, like let's say the energy side to Putuma Nhleko to run. Yes. But because the world is the way it is and because there are so many stakeholders here, it's difficult. But we want a benevolent dictator. But I think after that, they didn't want to position Amachitabo to be the oligarchs of the future.
Exactly what's happening abo SAA nangabo ESCOM, nangabo Telkom.
Sure.
When abo Elephant Consortium come in, Smart Ngonyama said that it did not struggle to be poor. They sold a certain portion. Abo Vodacom, they used to be under Telkom. They sold it to themselves. When they privatize, they're not privatizing to, a guy
ordinary
like me.
people.
Yeah, it's under Mbeki. Mbeki, his wife is probably a billionaire.
Apparently, Mamzanele Mbeki is a billionaire.
And for who? On behalf of the husband, all these guys, they're in a strategic position, and do you think these guys, they want their assets to be taken back to the state? No. Once they can see, we cannot come in. The very same thing that they did with mineral rights, if you've got land in your farm, you discover there is coal mine there is, copper. They say, no. You don't own what's
it's
underneath.
Not yours, yeah.
Yeah, and they come in, they'll kick you out, they're using these laws, unfortunately. So people like Abu Julius, they just want to have access where they don't have access. And after that, they say, you know what, give a certain share to us.